Welcome to Ordinary People, Extraordinary Connections, a podcast all about helping you comfortably connect with others in any situation. Hosted by Leanne and John, this podcast is proudly brought to you by Fortitude at Work. fortitudeatwork.com.au.
Welcome to Ordinary People, Extraordinary Connections. I'm Leanne.
And I'm still John.
You're still John?
I'm still John. It keeps staying. Well, Johnny, if you like.
Johnny, yeah.
Yep, or JD.
Yeah, that's a positive sign that you're still here, honey. I always take that as a positive sign.
I think so too.
That you're still around, still here. We're still doing this.
We are, but we're talking about something difficult today.
Yeah, we had a bit of a debate about, when this should be in the podcast schedule, didn't we, really?
We did. Well, actually, strangely, we were going to talk about happiness.
I know, we were.
And I said, why don't we talk about suicide?
Yeah.
And you went, oh.
And I was a bit nervous about that. I just sort of thought, I don't know that I want to talk about suicide. I mean, I do want it on the schedule, but should we talk about it now?
What are your worries?
I don't. I just think it's, for a lot of people, it's quite a confronting topic to be discussing, and I think, we need to be mindful of how we discuss it. And I think we need to, I don't know. I think my fear is that we don't do a good caring enough job of it. And those fears are probably quite unfounded.
Yeah, so it's scary.
It is very scary, isn't it?
And it's almost like lives are on the line, right?
Yeah.
And if we do something wrong here, it may be the difference between life and death.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing that...
That's scary.
Yeah, it's definitely scary. But on the other hand, I think we really do need to be talking about this topic because it is through discussion and the sharing of stories and thoughts that perhaps, we might help some people along the way.
Yeah, and there's been some famous people of recent that have taken their lives. There's also a TV series that caused a fair bit of debate.
Yeah. There's a second series of 13 Reasons, I think isn't it?
And there's been a lot of government funding for suicide prevention and also bereavement. So, it's quite topical.
Yeah, we've recently lost Kate Spade, handbag designer, I think, and Anthony Bourdain, a chef.
Yep.
And over the years, I guess there's been some really, well-known people that very sadly we've lost to suicide.
And about 10 Australians a week, something like that?
Yeah. In fact, I think it's we lose someone about every 3 hours in Australia, so quite high. And in fact, the suicide rates here in Australia are higher than the car fatality rates.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realise that. And again, because we probably don't talk about it often enough.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's probably, we really need to be going here today, don't we?
Okay, so what sort of structure would you like to do? Did you want to talk about what you can do for someone who's having suicidal thoughts, or what you can do if you're having suicidal thoughts yourself? Or?
Yeah, probably both of those things. I think what are some of the signs? What are some of the things that could be done? I don't think we need to rehash the numbers and the figures and the areas, because people can easily go online and look up those statistics. Certainly it's, for me, in the area of small business, when we look at mental health, I guess when we look at that overlap between who owns a small business and where are the suicide rates in Australia at the moment, then we need to be very mindful of males around the ages of about 40 to 44, I guess, in particular, and be very mindful of those needs.
Yeah.
But let's talk more about things that people can actually use and think about as a result of giving us 40 minutes of their precious time today.
Yeah. Well, I suppose someone who's not thinking of suicide as part of their own life, they're actually embracing life, and they're walking with gratitude, and they're enjoying their lives with the ups and the downs. They have struggles, and they have sadness, and they have loss, but suicide doesn't enter their world. They may have trouble understanding or what it would take for a person to get to that point.
That's a great point, because too often, and I've seen this a lot with the some of the online comments around, the Anthony Bourdain loss, was that it was so selfish and what a horrible thing to do, and that there are other, they could have just reached out, and how dare they leave their family behind, and there's been a lot of anger, and I think perhaps misunderstanding.
So thoughts of selfishness, and also how could someone who has so much, money, fame, attention, material possessions, the sort of stuff that most people struggle for and work towards, people that actually have all those things and still believe they'd rather be not on this world, not in this world at all. And that's hard to understand, hard to comprehend. Pardon me. So having a little bit of insight into what it's like for someone who sees suicide as a real option. To get a little bit of insight into that first, I think, is probably would help people have more of an understanding, be able to.
I agree. Yeah. Great idea.
Okay.
So who might that be that might, because you don't necessarily need to be, or you might not have a mental illness as such, to be in contemplating or thinking about suicide. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, how I see it is mental illness itself. That pretty much every human being is on the spectrum of every mental illness there is. So, and where, depending on where you are on that spectrum, depends on how much influence that has over your life, and the quality of your life. And then, of course, there's chemical influence, right? So, with depression and illnesses and mental illnesses, where you go up towards the other end of the spectrums around anxiety and depression. And then, of course, those that carry that fear of disconnection, of being alone, and also people that have put in a tremendous amount of energy based on their upbringing, their family of origin, around achieving certain things and then failing at that. And if their only identity was in what their goals were, and if they don't meet those goals, then they really don't have a sense of self anymore.
Right.
And when they get to that point, say, well, if I'm never going to be the person I thought I was, then I'm really not worth anything.
Yeah. Right.
And if I'm and no one understands, there's no one I can share that with. I'm totally alone. I feel hopeless, helpless, and worthless.
And so I guess what you're highlighting there, John, is that it's about your interpersonal, internal thoughts and feelings. It's not, it's not necessarily about I'm broke, or I've just written my car off, or it's not necessarily projected onto material things.
No.
It's about what you think of self, regardless of material things.
It's that inner voice,
right?
And that inner voice that tells you who you are, your sense of self. You could have millions of dollars and mansions, and still have a belief of low self-esteem, not good enough.
Yeah.
And not only not good enough, but worthless and hopeless and useless.
Yeah. And we could even go a step further and say sometimes it's those, sad beliefs about not being good enough, not being worth it, that actually delivers the money and the houses, and that drives you to that point.
Yeah. And all of that energy that goes into it.
Yeah.
It's
sometimes.
Yeah, that's it.
Not all the time, but sometimes. Yeah.
So if you carry a tremendous amount of weight of not being good enough.
Yeah.
And if you see yourself as a failure, and you see yourself as totally alone, then it's a fair and reasonable thought pattern to go, well, what's the point?
Right.
Yeah, what's the point in being here? I'm no good to me, and I'm no good to anyone else.
Right.
And in fact, often the world would be a better place without me.
Yeah. And that's not necessarily the case, but it's not the case.
That's the thoughts.
But that's the thoughts.
Yeah, and that's the feelings that follow the thoughts.
Okay. So what are some of the indicators that might, tell us that this person is feeling particularly vulnerable?
Sure. There's if you're being present to someone and you're having conversation or relationship with someone, and they talk about, they'll send out little indicators, because they're in the business of being very closed.
Yeah.
But they will send out these flags, these clues.
Yeah.
Things like they'll talk about, they'll say things like, I'd like to fall asleep and not wake up again. I just want to relax. I've had enough. I'm exhausted. I wish I wasn't here. All these little comments, and they're throwaway comments.
Right.
But those sort of indicators as a listener, little flags for you to ask the question.
Okay.
And there's a lot of fear around asking that question.
Yeah, and there might be instances like they'd be better off without me.
Yep.
My family would be better off without me, or
Yeah.
So there'd be those. You're saying that sort of general.
If they lose their sense of self and their self-esteem and their value in the world, then they very easily become convinced that the world is better without me.
And what about if they're not giving any verbal indicators? What other things would there be? Things like dress, or they play football and they've missed 3 football matches, or
Disassociating. They're disconnecting from society, from friends, from family. And not they may give away possessions.
That's
things that were important to them in the past are no longer important. They'll start throwing things away or giving things away.
and I've also read, I think somewhere, about a sudden shift in attitude. So there might have been several months of being quite unhappy.
Yep.
And quite quiet and quite depressed, and then go through a period of almost being overjoyed.
Yeah, they've made a decision. So once making a decision that freedom is near, that death and I'm out of here is near, it actually takes some weight off their shoulders. They have a period of I'm out of here soon, and I'm relieved. Some of that weight's been, and that shift in mood doesn't have to be from happy to sad. It can be from sad to happy. So noticing those shifts is another key. Yeah.
For another person to be looking in at the behaviour of that person, if you notice a change in mood that's unusual from the patterns you've seen in the past, then that might be an indicator that something's shifting in their thinking.
Yeah, that's it. And if you're present to someone, or you're noticing someone that you care about that is showing any of those signs, the key, believe it or not, is to ask the question. And people have fear around asking the question. And are you having thoughts of suicide, or are you thinking of killing yourself?
Yeah.
That makes some people shudder, because they don't want to. They feel like they might be putting the idea in their head.
Yeah.
Or they may be encouraging them by asking the question.
Yeah, and that's a myth, isn't it?
It is. All of the studies and all of the survivors of suicide will tell you that asking the question is one of the best things you could possibly do.
And why is that?
Firstly, they know you're not afraid to talk about it. You're not afraid to say it out in the open. And if you're going to say something like, are you thinking of killing yourself? That's an invitation to say that I'm actually okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
And when someone's holding all of that pain in, and as we've talked about in our other podcasts, the relieving pain is by talking about it. It's by venting it. It's by the tears and the words. So having a place where you can talk about your decision to die is the greatest relief and release that someone who's having suicidal thoughts can have.
Yeah. And again, it takes a lot of courage to ask that question, though.
It does.
Are you thinking of killing yourself? In fact, I've had to ask that question over a cup of coffee a couple of times now. And I remember the first time after I'd done some training, I'd done the Safe Talk training, and let's come back and talk about that towards the end of this episode. But I remember having done the Safe Talk training and then having a cup of coffee with somebody and being and listening to their indicators and thinking, I think I'm hearing a series of indicators here or invitations here. And thinking in my head, oh my goodness, I actually now am going to ask this question.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being present to myself first.
You felt it. You felt
yeah,
it.
starting to feel it in my body.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask the question, have you had thoughts of killing yourself?
Or are you?
Or are you thinking of killing yourself?
Yeah.
And then being present to that answer.
Yeah, well, and once again, the two fears, if you like, and the one is if I ask the question, it might sound like I'm encouraging it or giving them the idea. And secondly, what if they say yes?
Yeah, what if they say yes?
Yeah.
That's right.
What happens then?
That's right.
Okay.
What do I do next? And also, though, from a business perspective, because I remember we did some Safe Talk training with some accountants some time ago, and we talked about asking that question, are you thinking of killing yourself? And somebody saying, oh, I don't want to insult the client. You know, I don't want to insult them by saying, well, you know, is that what you're going to do? And a bit like you've just touched on, it was, well, that's actually not going to happen.
No.
What you're going to do is you're actually going to demonstrate to your client that my relationship with you extends beyond just the numbers or just the business.
Just the fluff surface stuff. Yeah.
I care about you as a human being.
Yeah, and even a no.
And even, that's exactly right. Even a no is actually a relationship builder because it immediately says to that client, I want to connect with you on a level past just having your business.
Yeah, that's it. And I'm not afraid to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then even if the no is genuine, that person now has an ally in the world.
Yeah.
That if that ever actually does become part of their life, that there is someone who's open to talking about that.
And I've never ever heard of anybody being insulted by somebody asking them that question.
Yeah.
Never ever.
Yeah.
I think what it does is it strengthens relationships. It doesn't tear them apart. It brings people closer together.
That's it.
And how beautiful to have that in a business arena where you're suddenly going, I'm not just talking about business, but I'm talking about you.
Yeah. So following on from that,
Yes,
then
go on.
the fear is it's a yes, right?
Yeah, then let's...
Okay, and then
So-
what do I do then?
Yeah,
what if
do
they
I
say
do?
yes because I'm not qualified?
Yeah,
Right?
that's right.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
What do I say? What do I do?
Yeah. So the fear then is that if they say yes, then I go, oh, geez, I don't know what to do next. Now, as you said, being open enough to ask the question is a direct display of your compassion.
That's correct.
So all you do is continue with your compassion, and that is that you don't mind talking about it. Now, you may have limitations to that.
Yes.
Because of your own fears, but whatever level you're okay with to continue with your compassion is fine, and it may be two or three more minutes, if you like, of that, and saying, "Tell me what's been happening, right? What's brought you to this point?" And allowing that person to vent and release every word. And this is the strange part of this, and this is the counterintuitive part, and that is that the more someone talks about wanting to die, the less chance it is that they actually die. And that seems strange, right? Because we're brought up in a world that says don't talk about your feelings for a start. But if you are going to talk about stuff, it's like it puts you more at risk. And in fact, the opposite is true. The more someone talks about their fear and their pain and their hopelessness, the less fearful, the less pain, and the more hope they actually receive.
Yeah, and that's there's some excellent points. And I want to come back and think about the person who's been brave enough to ask that question and be present to somebody. That strikes me as a very caring person. You know, they're brave enough to reach out and say, are you thinking of killing yourself?
Yeah.
I guess the next challenge for that person is to not immediately go into the problem-solving mode or wanting to save them, wanting to give them 10 reasons why you wouldn't do that.
Oh, don't be silly. You've got so much to live for.
Yeah, that's right.
There's so many good things in your life. Let's go have ice cream, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So and just as we were saying in our counselling podcast, getting out of the way of that and not going into a fixing mode and just allowing someone to feel
Yeah.
and to be as comfortable with that as you can be, and to resist your urge to make them feel better. And that sounds so strange, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And that really is hard, because if you're hearing somebody who's in pain over, financial pain or a relationship or something, and you can see a solution to that problem.
Yeah. It's really hard to hold that back.
Yeah, it's really hard to hold that back.
It is for a lot of people.
And particularly when that's somebody who obviously you're close to and they're suffering.
Yeah. And it's hard to watch someone you care about in pain.
Yeah.
The mindfulness around that is to have some sort of understanding or knowledge that the expression of pain is the release of pain.
Yeah, that's good. The expression of pain is the release of pain.
Yeah.
So allow them to release.
Yeah, that's it.
Let the valve,
Yep.
undo the valve and let the air come out a bit.
That's it.
And buy a bit of breathing space, I guess, by letting them be.
Yeah.
But I guess, though, that person has asked the question because they do want to keep that person safe.
Yeah.
They want that person to know
Yeah.
that you can live through
Yeah.
the trauma, you can live through the angst, and that there's hope in some level, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the Safe Talk program, where it talks about asking the question, looking out for the invitations, the flags, asking the question, and if it's a yes, then you to continue with the amount of compassion that you have in asking about it, not getting in the way of it, checking safety straight away, and that is to have an agreement in that moment that we'll be safe while we're talking.
Yeah. Okay,
and that is that you're telling me you're thinking that you want to die, and I want to know all about that. But are you safe now? And have you started something? Have you done something? Are you safe at the least while we talk? That's sort of like a next best step, if you like.
Yeah.
And then if you're comfortable with hearing the pain, you can give that some time, but keeping in mind that it's about safety, and finding ways to connect them. So if you're not in the business of being too present to that for too long,
good.
Okay, that if you have fear around that,
that's right.
Then know your resources and know that you can then connect them to someone that can help them in that next state.
So maybe just being aware of where the local doctor is, where the local hospital is, a local counsellor, knowing the number. And I think all the people that listen to this podcast would now know off by heart the number for Lifeline.
131114.
That's right. And in fact, if you find that there's a conversation happening that you don't feel equipped to be able to listen to, you could call Lifeline on your mobile phone, couldn't you? You could say, I'm sitting here with my friend, my partner, my neighbour, and I'm concerned for their safety at this point in time. Their name is Joe. Can I hand the phone over so that you could talk to Joe, please?
Yeah.
Because we all carry mobile phones with us all the time.
Yeah. So if you genuinely want to help someone, then the first hurdle is to challenge your fear of asking the question. Challenge your fear of listening to some pain without getting in the way of it and trying to fix it. And then thirdly, to have a resource. You're not alone. To connect them to.
To connect them to somebody. And you could do that instantly by calling Lifeline, because Lifeline counsellors are trained, aren't they, to be able to have those conversations and fully understand the level of risk that person may in fact be at that point in time. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also have a whole new set of resources to connect that person to.
Yeah. So you might even say, if you're the one who's asked the question, you might even say to that person, look, I'm feeling a little bit vulnerable about this myself. I'm really concerned. I want to keep you safe. Therefore, I'm going to call Lifeline right now so that we can get some expert guidance on where do we go from here.
Let's do this together.
It's
collaborative.
Fantastic. And that way then the person who's asked the question doesn't have to be a counsellor.
Nope.
Doesn't have to have the answers.
Doesn't have to listen to all the pain if they're uncomfortable with it.
Doesn't have to do that either. But just has been able to take a proactive step in helping to keep their loved one, whoever that person is, safe at that point in time.
Yeah, just for now.
Just for now.
Yeah.
Safe just for now.
Yeah.
You're listening to Ordinary People, Extraordinary Connections. Do you want to spread the word in your workplace, community, team or school? We're available to speak at your event or deliver customised training. Visit fortitudeatwork.com.au for more info.
Okay, so we're at the stage where we've asked the question, we've had the response, and we've allowed that person to talk about their situation. We're not going to give them any answers or solve their problem. And we're not going to tell them to, not be silly or you've got so much to live for.
That's it.
We're not going to go there. We're just going to be present to where they're at.
That's it.
And then we're going to call up a resource like Lifeline.
Yep.
And collaborate together and have the expert who's on the end of the phone talking to the person that you've spoken to. Is that right?
That's it. And then self-care, self-care, self-care.
What does that look like, Johnny?
So whenever being present to someone else's pain, it takes energy. And especially if you've been challenging yourself with the fear around asking questions and being present to pain.
And especially too if you've held back giving advice.
Absolutely.
You've bit your tongue.
That's it. And that it has an effect.
Right.
Okay, and that effect is that it may then be on your mind, right? You may be carrying something from that.
That interaction.
That's it. And you then, once again, as we've said previously, you're no good to anyone.
Right.
Unless you're good to yourself first.
Right.
So putting yourself first and your self-care first is so important before you can be help to anyone. So if you're in the business of helping people, you've got to help yourself first. So self-care, and that means doing things that you already know. Everyone has their own list of self-care things, baths, walks, maybe watching a movie, taking time out.
Yeah. You yourself going and talk to somebody about, I've just recently had this interaction with my friend who had thoughts of, suicide.
That's it.
And had said yes, they were going to kill themselves, and I've walked them through. So being able to debrief.
That's it.
Is that right?
Yeah, and finding a counsellor that's a good fit. If you haven't already got someone, or you may even have a very good friend or relative that is an unconditional listener. Yeah. And you know those people.
Yes,
you know
and
the
we've
ones.
done listening, haven't we?
That's it. So finding those resources, those people, the unconditional listeners, or finding a counsellor that's a good fit, and don't give up on the first one. Yeah. Find one that's a good fit for you. Then that is about you caring for you in that process.
Good.
Yeah.
And so if we come back to that interaction, so that person has just, been talking to somebody on the phone at Lifeline. What typically would happen if you're the Lifeline counsellor talking to that person? What are they doing, and what's their role in all of this?
The training that the crisis supporters, telephone crisis supporters, they're trained in a thing called Living Works, which is attached to Safe Talk, which has a framework around it, which talks about being listening out for the invitations we were talking about, being present to the pain, hearing all their reasons for wanting to die, to alleviate that pain. Okay, to check their safety in the present, and then and this framework, they walk them through a framework which talks about giving them enough time and patience for them to talk about their reasons for dying, to release the pain, alleviate the pain.
Okay.
And as we said in another podcast around those listening skills, about reflecting feelings and reflecting meaning, and being unconditional positive regard. Not judging them, not having an agenda. Yeah. The only agenda they have is to be present and to have them safe in this moment.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're trained in that.
And that's the key, right? Safe in this moment, because that's all any of us can ever do.
Apparently that's all we've got.
Yeah,
is the now.
That's true. I was just saying that to somebody today, actually. All we have is this very moment that we're living. That's all we have.
Yeah.
So if we lose somebody to suicide after that type of interaction, what then?
Self-care, right? And self-care, and also to spend time with someone to talk about those fears, and you may be carrying self-doubt, or I wish I had done this.
If only I had said.
That's it. Or I should have done that, or I shouldn't have done that.
I should have known.
That's it. Yeah, all of those what ifs, right?
Yeah.
And having a person to be present to you to talk about all of your what ifs.
Yeah.
For you to get all of your fear out with words or tears.
Yeah.
And fears is the key to your self-love and self-care.
Yeah, because you can only control that moment, right? So you can't control
another human being. You can't control the future. You can't even predict the future. No.
So the interaction that you have at that point in time is the only thing that you have.
It's the best with what you knew in that moment.
That's exactly right. And
it
comes
good
back
enough.
to trust, right?
And it's good enough. The best with what you know in the moment, and it's always good enough.
Yeah,
and to give yourself that break.
Yeah.
That you're not responsible for another human being's journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. You can only do the best that you can do at any given point in time, and it's always just good enough. That's exactly how it was meant to be.
Yep, that's it.
And perhaps for some people that's because they've just listened to this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
How amazing is that, and how lovely is that? Yeah. So I want to talk, if you want to really develop your skills, because obviously, we usually only talk for anywhere between 30 to 40 minutes if I shut up.
Yeah.
We usually only talk for that amount of time. And obviously, we've touched on Living Works. Mm-hmm. We've touched on Safe Talk. Let's talk a bit about what that is, because that's actually a program that is open to the general public.
Yeah.
Anybody can go off and do Safe Talk. So can you just explain what Safe Talk is and what people can expect? It's a 4-hour program, I think.
Yeah, it's Living Works, which I think Canadian based.
Yeah, but you can Google it. There's an Australian branch.
There is.
So.
Yep, and there's they run sessions all over the countryside. They do train the trainers, and trainers then run sessions all over the countryside. Yeah. And there will be a Safe Talk program not far from just about anyone in Australia.
That's right. That's right.
And as I said earlier, the government's helping in that process as well. And a Safe Talk program, it talks about all the stuff we've just talked about,
but in much more detail and skill based, isn't it?
That's it, and that's the 4-hour. But there's also a Living Works assist program, which is over a weekend, and that's where you become an assist trained person. So you're like the next resource to a Safe Talk person.
Yeah.
So a Safe Talk person can refer to an assist trained person.
Yeah.
Or a Safe Talk person can refer to a counsellor, or an assist person to a doctor. So,
and I guess what I realised when I went off and did my training in Safe Talk was I had originally thought, this is something that really only lifeline counsellors go and do, or the AMBOs go and do. I didn't think it was something that I would go and do as a member of the general public, not specifically working in the area of crisis.
It's open to anyone.
And it's actually open to anybody.
Yeah.
And I have to say that the skills that I've learned in the Safe Talk program, I've used. I'm much more aware now to listen out to, well, Safe Talk call it invitations, don't they? But I'm much more aware to, listen out to indicators, to be aware of what's going on around me. I have more confidence to talk about those scary conversations. And that's because I went off and did the program that's open to the general public. So if you Google Living Works,
yep,
and then go to Safe Talk, and assist is like the next level up, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the 2-day course.
Yeah, 2-day gives you even more skills, and it sort of goes more into how to keep people safe directly. It's about the responsibility of helping to keep people safe, whereas Safe Talk is more about couching the discussion and having the confidence.
It's more like I'm trying to think of a good analogy. The safe talk is around like the ambulance.
Yeah.
Whereas the assist is around the doctor.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the counsellors and psychotherapists and psychologists are your surgeons. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. That's a great analogy, actually. So I would encourage anyone who wants to, develop their skills in this space and really be more aware.
Yeah.
Of how might I reach out to somebody.
Absolutely. And if you're someone who's having suicidal thoughts yourself, recognising that there is help available.
Yeah.
There are people, you're not alone.
Yeah, you're definitely not alone, are you?
And there are people out there that would love to help and to be present to you and to do their best to understand what it's like to be you.
Yeah.
So you are not alone, and just that maybe tomorrow could be a better day,
Yeah.
and to make just to have the courage
Yeah, great.
to make that connection just might be worth giving it a go.
Yeah. Reach out to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just give it a go.
That's it.
Reach out to somebody just for this moment.
Exactly.
That's a lovely, lovely episode, Johnny.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad, was it? It wasn't too scary.
No, it actually wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be. I think it's a good general awareness session, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah. And even though there's limitations to what we know,
Yeah,
once again, we did the best with what we know in the now,
we did.
and that's good enough.
It is. And I have to say that number one more time because I think it's the perfect way to end. Lifeline, please, if you want to reach out, talk to somebody, or perhaps you want to share the number.
131114.
That's it. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Ordinary People, Extraordinary Connections with Leanne and John. Connect with us via Facebook at Fortitude at Work. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show.